Your Creative Push, episode 285.
You're never going to feel ready. You get ready by doing it. If you're waiting to feel ready, you will wait forever.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Amy Dresner. Amy is a former professional stand-up comedian, and she is the author of the new book, My Fair Junkie, a memoir of getting dirty and staying clean. And she comes on the show today to talk about not just her battles with drugs, alcohol, and sex addictions, and how she was able to come through the other end of that, but also her battle with writing a book and being able to put herself out there as honestly and as vulnerably as possible in order to hopefully help many people that read the book who are struggling with the same things. And since this is a podcast where two adults talk about adult topics, I just want to give a disclaimer here that if you have any little ones listening, just know that there are going to be some adult topics discussed. But Amy talks about the misconception that many creative people have that you need some sort of drama or tragedy or addiction in your life in order to have a significant life or significant content for your art, and how you can find inspiration instead by simply being outside of your comfort zone. Amy also talks about how she was able to be so open, so honest, and so vulnerable in writing My Fair Junkie, and also dealing with the resistance of not wanting to put herself back in that headspace of active addiction. But if you do have the nerve to live what you lived, how you should have the nerve to write about it. Amy also talks about some of the many things she learned in rehab and some of the things that really stuck, not just for getting past addiction, but for living a creative life. Namely, this very important line, how you do anything is how you do everything. And also how it is never too late to start something or to change, and how you'll never feel ready anyway. Amy talks about allowing yourself to have those shitty first drafts and how she never writes for herself and why she never reads the comments on any of her articles or any of her reviews. And finally, Amy talks about putting yourself out there and owning all of your mistakes, all of your flaws, and all of your humanness. This was one of my favorite conversations. It really, during the interview, it just had me sitting back. I had read her whole story, so I felt like I was already her friend and had already been down this journey with her. And it was kind of a masterclass. And I was just able to sit back and listen to somebody who had been through a lot of things, somebody who had gone through this hero's journey, and somebody who is wise in ways that I will probably never be able to live that experience and to gain that wisdom. So I challenge you to do the same thing, to sit back, close your eyes, and listen to somebody who has been through a lot of things, somebody who has been through their own journey and who knows what's up, so to speak. And just listen to her words of advice, especially towards the end, about being vulnerable, about putting yourself out there so that you can take control of so many resistances that probably have held you back in the past or might hold you back in the future or continue to plague you every single day. Taking control of your own voice, of your own creativity, and of your own life. Super inspiring episode. The book is amazing, and this interview was hands down one of my favorite interviews so far. So please do enjoy my conversation with Amy Dresner. Amy, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you, Youngman. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you very much for being here. I read your book. It's probably one of the, yours and Freddie Negretti's are probably the only two books I've had the time or the kind of passion to read in the past 2 years.
Nice.
So I thoroughly enjoyed it. You're an extremely talented writer.
Thank
and not
you.
only that, just super honest. And it was emotional at times, but it was like a crash course into your life. So maybe you could give us, maybe you could start out by giving us kind of a brief overview of kind of who you are and sort of how you got to the point you are today.
I'm a Jap from Beverly Hills. And, I was a drug addict on and off for almost 20 years. I've been to 6 rehabs and 4 psych wards. really slow learner. And I have meth-induced epilepsy. Good job. I started writing. I mean, my father's is a writer, so I've been writing my whole life, and I wrote for some magazines in college and stuff like that. But in 2012, I was tapped to write for the addiction recovery magazine, The Fix. And I started writing articles for them. And my articles were unlike, I guess, other people's. They were funny and really kind of irreverent and in your face and very autobiographical. And I've been writing for them. I've got a new piece coming out in, a couple weeks. So I've been writing for them for, I guess, 6 years. A friend of mine got a book deal, and it had been my dream to always put out a book. I've been chronicling some of this stuff on my computer for years. There are lots of half-finished novels. She passed on some of my Fix articles, and he was like, I love your writing style. Pitch me your book idea. And I pitched it, and we were off.
Now, you mentioned half-finished novels. So was it actually getting that permission, like actually having somebody tell you, okay, this is kind of, we want you to make a pitch and we want you to come up with an idea. Is that what made you be able to completely finish a novel?
I think it was a couple things. One is when you sell a book, you have to do a proposal, which is like the gnarliest thing in the entire world. So for those of you who don't know what book proposal is, it's like, why did you write the book? Why now? Why are people going to care? What's your platform? Give us testimonials. You compare it to 5 books that are similar and why yours is different and better. And you have to do 3 chapters of the actual book, write them, and then you have to outline the entire rest of the book. So for me, I had always started writing, but I never had outlined, so I didn't know where I was going. So I always kind of ran out of steam. So I needed that structure, and also I had a 6-month deadline to finish. So that was those things were part of what helped me actually finish it. And also, I finally had landed somewhere where I had a story to tell. It wasn't just like, I relapsed and then I got sober. And guess what? Then I relapsed again and then I got sober again. Like I had an arc, a narrative arc where I'd had real transformation and I had a story to tell. I'd landed in a different place and I had something to say instead of just a chronicle of sort of my car wrecks,
Right. And there were, for anybody that's read the book, you did have quite a few relapses. You were in and out of rehab, and you had different types of addictions that you were back and forth with. So I imagine that once you kind of were able to get to a place where it was over in a way, you can look back kind of like sort of from above and see how it is, and you can actually outline that whole story and kind of piece it together in that way to be able to tell a story. I imagine that makes it that much easier because you kind of have you're able to kind of put a bow on it.
Absolutely.
Well, and you mentioned kind of chronicling your journey, and actually you wrote an article for The Fix called Too Sober to Be Creative, which was pretty interesting because I think for a lot of people, they feel like their life is too mundane, or they feel like they need some type of tragedy or some type of euphoria in order to have like an interesting thing to recount. So could you kind of talk about what you write about in that article?
Yeah. So basically, it's a big fear for artists, painters and musicians especially, and definitely writers, that if they, get rid of the drama in their life or the addiction, that they're not going to have anything to write about. It's going to be boring. And so I wanted to do some research, and I actually researched, about whether there was really a connection between addiction and creativity. And what I found was there is a connection between the precursors to addiction and creativity, which are sort of risk-taking and compulsivity and, that kind of disinhibition and that kind of stuff. And also that really what makes you creative is the intensity of the feeling. So it doesn't have to necessarily be something bad. It can be something good too. And that what makes you, avails you of creativity is being outside your comfort zone, whatever that is, new experiences. I don't know. That made me feel better because I was like, after I finished My Fair Junkie, I was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to write about? Like, do I have to, put a needle in my neck again? Or like, it's like, really burn my life to the ground to write another book. And it's like, then I look to some of my heroes who have continued to write into sobriety, really interesting and good books. And they don't have to be boring because it's also your voice. That's what makes things interesting is your voice. and your take on things, it's like your angle. And then that makes, that anyone, they'll follow you anywhere. Like now I've got something really strange going on where my mother's fallen really ill, and now I'm a parent to a parent. And I'm really out of my comfort zone. So there's a lot of material there. It's taking a little while to find the funny in it, but I'm finding it.
Right, exactly. I sort of have an unfair advantage because I've read your book, so I feel like I know you inside and out because I've gotten to take that.
Right? No pun intended. Oh my God, right?
Yeah, I've taken that journey with you, and like that's the amazing thing about art and creativity, and especially writing, is that you get to be super vulnerable, let your reader in, and then come along for the ride. And the great thing about that is, like you said, once they're along that journey with you and they kind of trust you and they trust like kind of your wit or the way that you think about the world, that's why they continue to read. It's kind of having that trust back in them that you are able to kind of continue in life and continue to find the funny or find the wit or find the tragedy in all of like the normalcy of life.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's just even, it's same thing with characters in series. Once you're on board with them, you'll follow them anywhere, wherever they go in the series, if you love the character. And I mean, already people are like, book 2, like, what's next? I'm like, oh my God, it hasn't even come out in paperback yet. Just calm down, everyone, But yeah, it's again, it's your voice. It's like comedy. It's finding your voice. And once people relate to your voice, yeah, of course, it makes it easy when you've got drama, psych wards and suicide attempts and sex addiction and drug addiction. I mean, that, and all those characters and rehabs. And, of course, it makes it easier. So it's like, sober, your life. I mean, life still is in session. My life is calm, much calmer than it was, but there's still things happening that are uncomfortable, that are new. What was comfortable for me was sort of the chaos. What's uncomfortable is any kind of normalcy and things going well. I'm like, that's freaking me out more. And I also talked about too. I was on a thing with Jerry Stahl on HuffPo. It was like live about the connection between addiction and creativity, and it was like I feel like in my addiction I was seeking. Like transcendence. I was seeking a connection to something bigger and sort of getting out of myself. And, and you can do that in creativity. You get in the flow and it feels like, you're connected to something bigger. And sometimes you can write something and you're like, wow, where'd that come from? That's pretty awesome. Not all the time, obviously. Sometimes you're just like, what is that piece of crap? But, you can connect to sort of your, you channel your muse or whatever.
Right. And that's a difficult thing, and something we try to talk about on the show is, whatever your bad habits are, or maybe you have addiction to television, to alcohol, to gossip, to whatever, fill in the blank. It's trying to find a way to find those healthy addictions and try to find that same kind of, like you can't fill that need.
Yeah, that's something I've talked about too, which is just like, I mean, I think as an ex-addict, I mean, part of my creativity comes from sort of the characteristics that make me an addict, which are like my compulsivity and my intensity and, all of that kind of stuff, my curiosity and my sort of, and it's like, if you can rein that and put it towards something positive, you can accomplish amazing, cool things. But if you, let go of the reins and it goes towards, self-destructive stuff, you're screwed, It's the same horse, depending on where you're riding it.
Exactly.
My father, as a professional writer, was always just like, you don't wait for the muse to come. You sit and you get at the computer and you put in the time, and, she shows up or she doesn't. I mean, that's a professional writer. You write not when you're feeling it. Because if you wait to, when you're feeling it, you're waiting. That's not being a professional writer. That's just dabbling. And, I'm not, he really like sits the computer every day and writes. I'm not like that, but it's like, I like, of course, nothing is better than when you're like laying in bed at night and the piece is dictating itself to you in your head, and you're like, oh my God, here it comes. And then you get up, and now I've learned to write it down because you're like, I'll remember in the morning, and you never do. So of course it's when it's birthing itself, it's so like, oh, I gotta write this down. It's here, it's coming, that's much an easier process than sort of banging it out and then polishing and blah, blah, blah.
You talk in that article that we mentioned about having these kind of terrible moments where you're really down in the dumps or you've been awake for 14, 17 days. What was your record?
17, yeah.
17 days. Wow. And I know that like you said, you were documenting some of those things, but how do you like get the courage when you're still like, you've kind of picked yourself up from that temporary depression or temporary just in the gutters? I don't know how else to put it. How do you kind of recover from that and then like have the courage to like write down what you are experiencing, what you're feeling, and doing that honestly, because you are so honest in this book, My Fair Junkie. Like you're so honest that I'm just like, wow, I can't believe how much she's putting herself out there. And I know that you do that so that you can help other people.
Yeah.
So you can share your journey as honestly as you can,
Yeah.
So that you can hopefully help somebody else that's reading it. But it's still got to be hard.
It wasn't really, the stuff. Okay, there was the sex addiction stuff. I was sort of like, ugh. There was a couple of moments where I was like, I don't want to put this on the page. I was like, this is embarrassing, and I was like, you know what? And as a writer, I just know like the stuff you don't want to put on the page is exactly the stuff you need to put on the page. That's the stuff that, not only is the most, scintillating for people or whatever, but that's also the secrets that people inside are going to go, oh my God, me too. I never told anyone that. Like, oh my God, that's the stuff. The more specific it is, the more universal it is, ironically. So, and I also just thought, if I'm trying to look good in an addiction memoir, like why bother? Like, no one expects you to look good in an addiction memoir. And I mean, and Jerry Stahl, who blurred my book, who's like one of my heroes, and I say this all the time, he says, if you had the nerve to live what you lived, you should have the nerve to write it. And I was like, all right, then. So I did it. I wrote it. And yeah, I wanted to help other people. I wanted other addicts to not feel alone and not feel broken and not feel shamed. And, there was freedom in that. And I wanted non-addicts to understand what it's like to be an addict and the way that we think and the way that it feels in our bodies and all of that. And so I'm pretty disinhibited in that way. I don't really have a filter. I'm not sure if that's because I've done way too many drugs or had way too many seizures that sort of I've blown that out. But I've always been just like incredibly honest, and not in a mean way, but just in a sort of overly revealing way. So I don't really have that thing where I'm like, I'm going to make myself look good. I didn't care about looking good. Some people are like, well, she seemed like an asshole or whatever. It's like, well, when you're mentally ill and strung out on drugs, you are an asshole. So let's be honest. Plus, there's nowhere to go. If you're angelic and a good person while you're loaded and crazy, where's the transformation? Where are you going? There's nowhere to go.
Exactly. Well, in the actual process of making the book, what were some of obviously, like we just talked about, you weren't afraid to be honest and to put everything out there. But in the actual process of, writing a book, which is a very difficult thing to do, it takes a lot of commitment and a lot of time. What were some of the resistances that you maybe encountered during that process?
I didn't want to put myself back in that headspace, that active addiction headspace. It was really, it'd taken me a long time to escape that. But that book is written in present tense, apart from flashbacks. And so I had to go back and put myself into that specific headspace. And like I said, I'd been chronicling a lot of this stuff for years, like the stuff about the British psychiatrist. I wrote that right when it happened. So I didn't have to recreate that dialogue. I had it on my computer. And I did not write it in order. I mean, I had it all outlined, but there were parts where I was like, I don't want to write that today. It's just, I can't go there. It's too different. It was very much an emotional roller coaster ride to write the book. And I reached out to other addiction memoirists and I said, is this your experience? Is this normal? And they're like, totally normal. Your mood varies depending on what you're writing about. So there was stuff there where I was like, okay, I'm willing to write this stuff today, but I don't want to go into that right now. And eventually I had to obviously go into all of it. So that was some of the resistance.
And then what was that like? Because obviously it's, coming out of that experience, you're a different person. And I can understand, standing on the edge and not being like, I don't want to write this today because it's a different Amy, and it's something that I've gotten through. How were you able then to put yourself back in that headspace?
Well, like I said, I'd chronicled it and I'd, relived it, so, I'd relapsed so many times that I have a very good memory for what it felt like and what it was like. And I've always had that sort of outside, a part of me watching myself throughout my life. And I don't know if that's the writer in me or what. And that's also what let me get through it, was there was a part of me that was watching this, that wasn't fully in it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always kind of saw it as a story. I mean, I think it was Douglas Copeland that said, if you can't see your life as a story, if you can't see your life as a story, how else can you get through it? You've got to kind of see it as a story. I did not recognize the person I was writing about at times. Like, I knew it was me and I knew I'd done those things, but I didn't recognize that person. And I also had to grapple with some shame and some forgiveness. I had to really kind of go, okay, like, I did do those things and I'm not that person, and I forgive myself. I did the best I could at the time, with the tools I had and where I was at, and we can't go back. We can only move forward. So there was a place of just sort of dropping the shame and sort of getting into self-acceptance and forgiveness for what I had done or what I'd done to other people. The other thing that was very difficult was, when I was in it, I had awareness, but I also had denial, and I believed my own lies, and I was in the possession of the addiction or whatever. I believed my own bullshit. And with sobriety and time, I didn't have those filters. So it was much rawer. I saw what it really was. I saw who I really was. I saw what I really did. I had much more insight into my behavior, and that made it a lot more painful. I mean, it made the book, I think, hopefully more insightful, but it made it less, I had less excuses. While I was going through it, I was like, well, I was doing a lot of blaming and self-pity, and I was the victim, and don't you know, and, I'm so sick and I'm broken and you don't get it, or whatever. But without that and with some time, I saw everything very, very clearly. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
And I kind of wanted to touch on that too. The idea of like forgiveness and forgiving your past transgressions. And I think no matter what anybody's going through that's listening right now, a lot of times we get into these funks where we're like, all right, whether it's as simple as I've been too lazy or too distracted to do the thing that I love, to write that book that I want to write, or to start doing stand-up comedy, or to start a podcast, or whatever it is, whatever that kind of creative thing is. And we just get kind of stuck in those stories that we tell ourselves, and we don't forgive ourselves. What advice would you give to people to kind of forgive those like kind of past transgressions, however big or small they might be, so you can kind of start creating the life that you want for yourself?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's ever too late to start anything. And that's why I dedicated the book to anyone who thinks it's too late. Because I really kind of got it together in my 40s. I wrote a book in my 40s and really, started over in my 40s from scratch. Number one. Number two, shame will just keep you spiraling and depression, and it's not going to motivate you to go do something. The other thing too is what I learned is you're never going to feel ready. You get ready by doing it. If you're waiting to feel ready, you will wait forever. And, and there's that quote in the book that people have made like memes out of, which is just so weird and mind blowing. It's like, what? Like people are making memes out of stuff from my book or stuff I say on podcasts. Like, huh? Like from, epic fuck up to like, to example to like inspiration. I'm like, oh my God, this is bizarre. Like I just was, an ex-junkie that wrote a book. That's it. But my dad had said something to me years ago, which was discipline creates stability. Stability does not create discipline. And my whole life, I was waiting to feel ready. I was waiting to feel not depressed. I was waiting to feel stable or okay to do the things I wanted to do. And it was creating a disciplined life and a routine and a structure that gave me the feeling of stability. And I think a lot of people do it backwards.
What were some of those basic steps that you, because I know that that's kind of like a snowballing thing of kind of creating that life around yourself and doing the small things so that it can snowball into like a bigger life change. What are some of those smaller things that you did and that other people can do?
I mean, I'm not really great at routines, to be honest with you. Like, I'm truly, I'm still struggling. I've got 5 years. Like, I'm very much an addict. So either I'm doing it every day. If I give myself one day off, I never do it again. That's, like that's the gym. I'm like, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym. That was 2 years ago. I don't even know where the gym is now. You know what I mean? That's it. I'm like, I got my new, sweatpants on and I'm doing it and blah, blah. Or else like, I don't it's been, now it's like, I'm just, super flabby and skinny. And it's like, I don't, I'm still paying the gym because I keep thinking I'm going to go. It's like, go, Same thing with meditation. I was meditating every day, twice a day, feeling awesome, felt so awesome. I stopped. I was like, this is feeling so good. It's working. I'm going to stop. But it's like, again, if I gave myself one thing, like, oh, I don't have time this morning, then I'm gone. It's very extremism. It's like you're doing it all the time or you're not doing it. It's like abstinence or full bender, and I think that's very classic for addicts. It's like, well, I used to smoke meth and now I'm vegan. It's like, okay. You know what I mean? Like we get really go to these extremes. I have things in my life. I have responsibilities now. I didn't have responsibilities for a long time. I have a job I show up to. I have, I have deadlines. I have, that kind of stuff. And also when you're a freelance writer, you got bills to pay. So you write because you got bills to pay. And with the book, I had a 6-month deadline. That's not very long.
Yeah, 6 months is not a long time, but it's so good to have a deadline sometimes.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, that's why I give my I give my sponsees deadlines. It's like, I got to give myself deadlines. The thing I found for myself, it's like, and we all know this, it's like, procrastinating, is so much more energy and time consuming than actually just doing it. The relief you have to just do it, just do it. Do the, eat your frogs first, as I think there's a saying, like do the difficult stuff first. And it's like, it's such a relief. Anytime I've been pushing something off, like taxes, I didn't do my taxes for years because I didn't know how, because everyone had been taking care of me and doing it for me. And then all of a sudden I was like, and then I'm on it now. And it's such a relief. Like, oh, I'm on top of it. I'm a grown up. I did it. It's out of the way. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to spend mental energy thinking about it or beating myself up for not doing it.
Right. And along the process, one of the themes of your book and a lesson that really struck a chord with me was something you heard in AA, but it didn't really hit you until you were doing those community service hours, those many community service hours they had to do. That idea of how you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that it makes things so much easier when you do have that that mentality of, okay, I have to do this thing.
Yes.
So I might as well do it quickly, do it before the procrastination kicks in and it's like 2 minutes before the deadline. And also I might as well enjoy it because I have to get it done. Yeah.
That was something my sponsor told me, but I looked it up and it's, that quote is attributed to many different people. So I don't know where it exactly originated. It's attributed to different authors. It's a proverb. It's, whatever. How you do anything is how you do everything. And I think that that's really true. Also, it's like, if you're going to clean your kitchen, do it well, put the music on and really clean it. Don't just use a wet hand and scrape everything into a corner. You know what I mean? Like I've done it. You know what I mean? I've done that. Right? Of
That's
course.
my go-to move.
Yeah. It's like you got avocado on the floor. You just got to use your sock to kind of, smush it into the, you know what I mean? And I'm not always perfect. It's like, just grab the Windex and clean it. Like it's not, but what I did learn doing the community service was, I was sweeping the streets. I had 240 hours of community labor to sweep streets for 8 hours a day in the sun. Like poo and syringes and it was gnarly. And I just thought, this is going to take me some time. So I can either find the joy in this and the lessons, or I can be miserable about it. And also I have to finish, otherwise I go to jail. So you know what I mean?
Good motivator,
where are the lessons here? Could this be the best thing that ever happened to me? What could I learn here? What's enjoyable here? Oh, look, I am eating churros. I'm listening to ranchero music. It's like, oh, I'm learning how to really sweep. I'm getting muscles. I'm getting some sun. I'm a work ethic, humility. I just embraced it and thought, it's like, I got very Zen about it. I was really just in the moment, there's something very, I had never, as a writer, it had always been in my head. And there's something very, there's very cool about manual labor because you're so exhausted when you get home. You don't have time to think about dumb crap. You know what I mean? You're tired. Your body is tired. Your mind is tired. You're just done. And it's like, and there's also, it's repetitive. And it's like, I remember I've been in a lot of different therapies. And one of them was mindfulness. It's like when you're washing a dish, really wash the dish. Feel the soap on your hands. Feel the water. Be present. So I really tried to do that.
And that also goes along with what you were talking about before, with like just waiting to be ready. I think that a lot of people they have all these mundane tasks, or they hate their jobs, or they have all these other things that they need to do before they can get to the thing that they really like the kind of the pinnacle, the place that they want to be. And that's how life passes you by. That's how life just quickly passes you by. And I think that those things go hand in hand.
Yeah, and it's like nothing's instant. It's like you've got to climb the ladder. You chip away. It's a piece at a time. Every day you go, okay, I'm gonna hit up this editor and see if she wants something. I've got this idea. It's like, also let yourself be crappy. I think there's a perfectionism sometimes where it's like, well, if it's not perfect right away, then I'm not going to do it. It's like, let your first draft be crappy. Just get it down on the page, and then you can shape it, and then you can polish it. Let yourself be bad. Let it be bad. I think one of the things that, when I was using was that I felt completely disinhibited, and so I was like super free on the page. And you can do that in sobriety as well, which is just like shutting off the editor, just letting yourself just flow, let it be crappy, let it be funny, terrible, awful, just get it all out there and then shape it. Then you turn on the editor and you go back through.
Yeah.
You don't do the editing while you're writing. Otherwise, you're stuck on the first line for 3 hours.
Right.
Reworking it.
Well, and that also, that goes along with the idea of just writing for yourself, or doing whatever kind of creative thing for yourself, and just completely ignoring the fact that maybe someday somebody might see this. For now, it's just you. It's
absolutely.
like for your eyes only.
Absolutely. Well, that was very much how I wrote that book. Mm-hmm. I just wrote that book. I never thought about people reading it or what they were going to think or any of that, because then it would have really hindered me, and it would have really, stopped my truth. Like, I've been writing for The Fix, like I said, for 6 years. I've never read the comments on my articles because, either people are going to love me or they're going to hate me, and then it's going to inhibit me from telling my truth. I'm not writing for you. I'm writing my story. I'm writing my truth. And it's like, if you like it, great. If you don't like it, that's cool too. Everyone's got their own opinion. I mean, my father said the same thing. Don't read the reviews, Ames. You'll either think you should win a Pulitzer Prize, or you're going to want to throw yourself out a window. Do not read the reviews.
Your dad's the best, I think. That was one of my takeaways from reading this book too. I love your dad.
He's the best. I know. Anytime I'm like, oh my God, this is happening. He's like, welcome to the real world, rookie. I'm like, oh my God. Okay.
Oh man.
Yeah. My dad is awesome. I mean, I think that was a really powerful line, and I remember him saying that, and where we were at the dinner, and I had been relapsing for years, and he said, we've been doing this a long time. And I said, what? And he said, you at the bottom of the well. And I thought, ooh.
Damn.
Ooh.
Damn,
yeah,
Dad.
Right? Ooh.
Yeah.
That cut deep. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, he had a lot of good lines.
Yeah, right? I know. Those were all his lines.
Damn writers.
I know.
Well, I wanted to ask you then about having completed the book. I mean, it's a thing in the world now. It's in my hands. It's in your hands.
God.
And people are reading it. How does it feel now? Like, do you have any resistances now that it's, completely out? Like you said, you were writing it without the editor in mind. You were writing it without the audience in mind. What's that experience been like for you now that it's like a completed thing?
Well, of course, I did have an editor. The publisher did assign me an editor, and then she went through and she said, a little harsh, and I was like, I am harsh. I am on PC. She'd be like, she wanted to soften things, and I just said, I'm okay with being an asshole as long as I'm an interesting asshole. It's I was less interested in being likable as being truthful. If everyone loves you and you're not pissing people off, you're doing it wrong. I mean, I wasn't trying to provoke people, but I feel, whether anyone will ever date or marry me ever again, I have no idea. Some people have been like, oh my God, I fell in love with you in that book. I'm like, oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
I feel weirdly bulletproof. A big way I deal with my own shame is to own it. I put it out there, because then what is anyone going to say? Well, you blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, I wrote about it. Next.
Exactly.
So, I feel, I did read one thing where someone's like, I don't have sympathy for her because she came from a privileged background and she seems like meh, meh. And it's like, you know, and then I was like, okay, no more reading, you know, that now I was like, oh, and I'm too sensitive. It's like, you know, I feel the messages I've gotten from readers were like, thank you for being real.
Yes.
My God, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your bravery. Thank you. Like, I feel less broken. Like, oh my God, real addiction memoir without excuses, the real deal, raw, you know, they're like, thank you. Like, people really respond to honesty. They respond to honesty and they know when you're bullshitting them. So I don't feel embarrassed. It's what happened. I am a female perpetrator of domestic violence. I was a female sex addict. I was a female drug, IV drug. Like, that's what happened. And, you know, I can't change my history. And I really like who I am today. So I'm glad all that happened because that is how I became who I am today. That's the fire I walked through to become the person I am today. So I don't feel ashamed. I don't feel embarrassed. People think I'm brave. I don't think it's brave. You know, it's just what happened.
Well, I think you're brave. I think anybody that's able to put themselves out there or put the time and work in to create a book or create anything is a brave person, just a brave human being. So good job. And I really like that word bulletproof because I think that kind of like what you're talking about before with like the community service and having to do like manual labor, and then you get home and you don't have time to like worry about all the other like existential crises, whether they're actual crises or not, in your head. Like, you don't have time to think about that.
No, you're too busy picking like leaves and straw, you know, old bits of straw and, you know, out of your hair. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Getting like the street soot off you, you know, and I mean, I made a joke about that in the book where I like, you know, I'm like, I'm a working man now. I want a blowjob and a sandwich and silence. You know, I was like so tired, you know, and I'd have roommates who were like, oh my God, my spray tan is too dark, you know, and this boy blocked me on Facebook. I'm like, shut up. You know what I mean? Like, you have any idea what I've done today? You know, I've been spat at by homeless people. You know what I mean? I've been ignored by the public. I've swept human poo for 8 hours. And this, like, I don't care. Like, it changes your perspective on what's important. You know, oh, this guy didn't text me, but who cares? Like, did I throw my back out? You know, I was asleep by like 6:30, you know, and it was like, that's the other thing was like, when I was in community labor, I was posting daily about it on Facebook. Another day on the chain gang. And then I'd just show a picture of something that I saw on the street or talk about a story or something I learned. And there are pictures actually on the website that are really funny. Other people in the chain gang were like, I'll be friends with you on Facebook, but do not tag me on anything. I'm pretending that I'm on a business trip. And I was like, I owned it all. And people like were rooting for me. And they were bummed when I finished. They were like, oh my God, that was the best. They were like, get arrested again. That was so awesome. I'm so done. I'm bummed you're finished. There is a freedom in owning it because no one has anything on you. There's no secret.
Absolutely. And when you can own, even to yourself, the things that you struggle with, the things that maybe are holding you back, whether you are a procrastinator, whether you're lazy, whether you watch too much TV, or whether you're just scared to do whatever in life. If you can kind of own that and put words to it or put a name to it, put a face to it, it's much easier to tackle. And then when you do tackle it and you do put your inner truth out there, it does make you bulletproof. I do believe that.
Yeah. And being scared is just not, you know, I mean, I was scared my whole life. And now I'm just like, oh, you know, being scared is just not an option. Is not an excuse. I mean, everything that's new is scary, always. And, you know, you're not brave unless you're scared. There's no, you know, courage unless you're scared. And the more you do it, then the less scared you get. But again, it took me forever. I thought, well, I'll do that when I don't feel scared, you know? And it's like, that point never comes. It's always hard when it's new. It's always scary when it's new. The more you do it, the less scary and hard it becomes. Anything.
Absolutely. Well, Amy, it is time for our final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of encouragement.
Oh my God.
And just give them that final push to pursue their own creative passions. Oh my God,
so put on the spot.
Yes, got her.
Go for it. Do not let anyone stop you. Start with the smallest thing. Just start. If you believe you can, you can. Like, I can't believe that I did this. I really, really can't. And it's like, I really feel like that when you start taking action, that the sort of, I mean, I hate to be all hippy dippy, but like the universe sort of backs you up. Start small and, take a class, whatever, just, get going. Why not you? That's the other thing. Why not you? Everyone's like, oh, well, why not you? You're just as eligible. You're just as talented. You're just as able as anybody else. And it's, it's not the people necessarily who are the most talented that make it. It's the people that are the most persistent. Persistence is a huge part of it. Persistence and hard work, which I avoided my whole life. I just wanted it to be handed to me, some gift. Ding! And that's not the way it works,
No, I totally agree.
You know what I mean, though? Like, why not you?
Why not you? And you did it. And it's always interesting. Like I said, like I feel like I know you from reading the book.
Yeah.
And I'm just so happy for you.
Not
only to have, written the book, obviously, like that brings me joy to see people do their kind of creative passion and complete these like great goals, but just to see you come through the other end, it's great to see and talk to you in real life and know that you've made it through just from your story. So congratulations.
Like, thank you. Yeah. I'm a resilient motherfucker. Like, holy shit. Like, and it's like, I mean, I'm not, I am single again. And and that I dealt with a heartbreak. I walked through that. Now I'm dealing with my mom's illness, walking through that. We're in a serious negotiation based on the book. It's all, scary and new, and life continues. My best friend just had some weird sort of heart embolism in Mexico. I mean, life continues. And it's like, I feel lucky to be alive. I mean, I really shouldn't be alive if you read that book. Yeah. That's the whole thing. It's like, people are like, well, how is she alive? And how does she have her teeth? You know what I mean? Like, she should look like an Apple doll, from all the drugs. But
well, you certainly had fortunate timing in some instances.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely lucky.
For sure. So it's like, yeah, I don't be afraid. Just put it out there. Who cares what people think? Who gives a shit? It's like, you really can't, you cannot care. You got to do your thing. And even if you fake it, I faked it for a long time. I faked that I didn't care. Until I didn't care.
Really?
And I noticed too, that the more scared I am, the more I pretend I don't care. The bigger and more obnoxious I am. I'm like, oh, okay. That's my, I make space for myself. It's, you just got to do contrary action. You can't let your emotions and your thoughts push you around, because then you're just zigzagging all over the place. I feel like it today. I don't feel like it today, blah, blah, blah. You stick to action. You attach your ass to the train of action. No matter how you feel, fuck your feelings and take the action. That's really what I have to say. It's like, that's how I finally got it together. Instead of like how I felt, taking my emotional temperature all the time. How do I feel now? How do I feel now? How do I feel now? Who cares? That changes all the time. You'll just be meandering all over the place. You just continue to take consistent action every day.
Exactly. And stop waiting to be ready.
No, you'll never feel ready. No, yeah, you get ready by doing it. Absolutely. I didn't believe me. I was like, I got to write a book. Oh my God. I was like, and it was like literally walking in the dark with like a tiny pen light. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't know where the cliffs were. I had no idea where I was going. I was like, I was figuring it out as I went along, and that's okay. That's how you figure it out the first time. The next book will be easier, hopefully.
Yep, and already starting to build the material for the next one.
Oh, God, right? It's coming to me.
Cool. All right, Amy, so where can people find the book, and where can people find and follow you?
I am on Twitter at Amy Dresner. I'm on Instagram at Amy Dresner, where you can see a lot of pictures of Colonel Puff Puff, a few of me, and a lot of the book and some dumb memes I make. I have a website, amydresner.com, with all my podcasts, links to articles, pictures from the chain gang. You can write to me there and I'll write you back. I promise. I'm on Facebook, Amy Dresner Official, and you can buy the book. It's at many local Barnes and Nobles, and it's also on Amazon. The hardcover came out in September. The paperback is coming out in this September. So there's an audiobook, there's a Kindle version. I narrated it. So it's quite a ride. It's quite a ride. You get to hear about everything and everyone that went in my body. It's pretty interesting.
Everything and everyone. Well, I can attest that it was a emotional journey. There was ups and downs. But you are, like I said, you are a very talented writer. And
thank you.
One of the hardest things to do as a writer is make people laugh out loud. And you definitely do that.
Did you laugh out loud?
I LOL'd a bunch.
I think it's important to, when you're writing a really heavy book that involves like drug addiction and suicide attempts and psych wards and mental, it's like you have to put some lightness in it.
You have to release the reader a little bit from that.
There's got to be some places where people get to take a breath and have a laugh. Otherwise, they're like, "Oh my God, I got to garrote myself with dental floss right now." Like, it's so heavy. Right. And for me, humor was a big way to get through it. I was like, I got to find the humor, or I'm not going to get through this. Like, how is this funny right now?
Right.
That's how I got through a lot of crises.
Got to find the humor in it.
Absolutely.
And so we'll have all of that linked up at today's show notes page as well at yourcreativepush.com/Amy Dresner. Amy, thank you so much again for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
I cannot thank Amy enough for coming on the show and for being so open with us. 2 quotes real quick that I want to recount from the episode. Number 1, you get ready by doing it. If you're waiting to feel ready, you'll wait forever. So important. And something that has held me back multiple times through many endeavors, even after I have started this podcast, even after I try to preach that same message. It's one of the hardest things to get over. It's that fear that gets inside of you that tells you that you're not ready to do this thing. What if this happens? What if that happens? You can't worry about those things. You can't let them hold you back, because the longer you let them hold you back, the longer you will be sitting there and you will regret it. All the time that you've wasted, all the time that you could have been getting through this first pursuit to get to something else, to see where the path will lead you, instead of thinking day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year about where this path will lead you if you do take that first step. You can't worry about that. Just learn as you go, figure it out, put yourself in those situations so that you can figure it on the fly. And number 2, there is a freedom in owning it, because nobody has anything on you. There's no secret. For me, this was really important to be able to put myself out there in my writing, also in this podcast, to be vulnerable. And even if it's just you writing for yourself or doing your art for yourself, be as vulnerable and honest as you possibly can be, because that's where you really dig deep and figure out what has a significance to you, what has a meaning to you, and what really is scary in your life. You might realize that once you put certain things down on paper, whether it's in writing or any type of other creative outlet, once you write it out there, it might not be as big and scary as it was when it was in your head. It's something that is super effective for me, and I know it can be for you too. If you put out your deepest and darkest secrets, or maybe not go that far, but put yourself out there, the things that are scaring you or frustrating you, put out the fact that you are scared and you are frustrated, and it might make it not as big of a deal. It might make it not as scary. My conversation with Amy actually went a little bit over time after the episode, so I have some extra content for all of the Patreon supporters. If you head to yourcreativepush.com/Patreon, you can get there. Amy talked about writing the most brutal sexual experience for her, obviously, but for me as a reader, also taking that experience in. We talked about that, but also how we all find ourselves in situations where we're asking, what the hell am I doing? Amy talks more about daring to be unlikable. And we also talked about one of the experiences from the book that pissed me off the most. Again, that will be at yourcreativepush.com/Patreon if you want to check that out. And also, if anybody is struggling from addiction, I highly recommend you check out all of Amy's articles on The Fix. We will have that linked up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Amy Dresner or yourcreativepush.com/285. On next week's episode, we have Tom Hart. Tom runs the Sequential Artist Workshop, or SAW, a school for cartooning and graphic novels in Gainesville, Florida. And Tom comes on the show not just to talk about SAW, but to also talk about his long and storied history as a cartoonist and graphic novelist, about trusting your instincts, and about objectivity, self-love, and acceptance. If you want to check out Tom, you can head to his website, tomhart.net, or again, we'll have that all linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/285. But that is all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will be here for you next week if you need the push again. I love you all so much. Go get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.